Welcome to Verb Voice, interviews with leaders in in the clinical research ecosystem. I'm your host, Rob Howie, and my guest today is Craig Lipset, the founder and advisor of Clinical Innovation Partners and the co-chair of the Decentralized Trials and Research Alliance, DTRA. Craig, as always, good to see you again.
Good to see you, Rob.
The clinical trial industry seems well aware of the critical shortage of CRAs. It's a challenge that has existed for several years now, and it appears to be getting worse. What will it take to solve it?
It's a great question, Rob. I would boil a lot of the what it will take down to a willingness to adapt, a willingness to take different approaches, and a willingness to not rely on our assumptions and expectations of the past. In many cases, some of that willingness is going to be driven by a willingness to look beyond just years of experience, a willingness to embrace technology that can drive efficiency and better training and skill sets. We've seen the industry embrace that type of willingness. Over the last 2 years during the pandemic, this industry rapidly evolved and incorporated new approaches that had been available but struggled for adoption. Approaches like risk based monitoring, approaches like decentralized clinical trials, none of which were new, but they demonstrate to us that our industry can evolve itself. It can adapt if there is that sense of urgency. And just like the pandemic was that catalyst for change, I think we have to have the same sense of urgency here.
There's a lot of interest. You mentioned decentralized clinical trials, of which you're the co-chair of the association. At the same time, there is concern about the increasing amount of technology that CRAs must learn to be effective in monitoring decentralized trials. How do new trial models and technology impact the role of CRAs?
The role of the CRA is constantly changing. It certainly has changed over the years that many in the workforce who are in senior roles have operated, and it continues to change as we introduce new technologies, whether risk-based monitoring on the one hand, which can drive a more rational use of limited resources, or decentralization, as you mentioned, the which is driving a wider range of data sources in our trials. We're seeing technologies like eSource and the ability to potentially connect EHRs into our study databases. All of these are driving change for our CRAs. And just like any technology, that's going to bring some opportunities and challenges. Opportunities for us to work far more efficiently than we have in the past, but potential challenges in terms of workforce readiness, in terms of usability and experience for our colleagues. We see our sites struggling with this as well. And I think the technology community is hearing that and is starting to respond differently around ensuring that the experience of the stakeholders involved is being considered. But it certainly means that the workforce we're raising up for clinical operations, for data management, is going to look different going forward than it may have in the past.
New skills will be required, and therefore new educational opportunities and new training, of course. There's a lot of discussion on the need to create greater diversity in recruiting clinical trial subjects. What impact does a more diverse clinical workforce have on achieving that goal?
We know when we talk to patients that representation matters. And while we can't expect every participant in a research study to necessarily find an investigator or study coordinator who looks and represents everything about themselves, seeing representation in the workforce at the site and around the staff and around the process, it does matter, and it does matter to our participants and other stakeholders. But diversity also brings other benefits into our workflow and our process. By bringing more diverse individuals into our workforce, we'll also benefit in terms of that range of other perspectives and insights from lived experience that others will bring as we expand the backgrounds of the people who are part of our ecosystem.
Greg, the Tufts Center for the Study of Drug Development held a roundtable on the correlation of CRA experience and performance. You spoke at that event. What conclusions do you draw from what you heard?
A key conclusion for me was the sense of head nodding and alignment around the challenge and around some of the paths forward we have to start to consider. The people around the table were extremely highly engaged. Uh, they believe in the data that was presented, that years of experience are not necessarily an adequate surrogate for high quality. And they believe in the data around our monitoring efficiency not necessarily being optimized today in areas, for example, where we're still doing 100% source data verification. And so there seems to be a strong alignment, and this is with clinical operations leaders from some of the largest and most important companies and rapidly growing companies in our space, whether sponsors and CROs, that seem to all nod their heads that we need smarter ways to include more people in the workforce. Now, some pointed to examples of where they're trying to make some of that happen right now and may need more help and partners. And for others in the audience, it may have been a bit of an awakening that maybe some of the strategies they've been taking, maybe their time is due for a makeover and an upgrade.
Our guest is Craig Lipset, Clinical Innovation Partners. Craig, thank you for sharing your thoughts with us.
Thank you, Rob.